Welcome to Moon Mind. In this video, we will sit beside a series of ancient Buddhist stories that have quietly guided human hearts for more than 2,500 years. Stories about anger that dissolves without a fight. About suffering that softens when it is finally understood. About people who spent years searching for something they were carrying all along. A king watching mountains gather on the horizon. A monk lying awake with questions that refuse to sleep. A traveler who discovers a hidden treasure sewn into the robe he wears every day. A stranger who arrives carrying rage and leaves carrying silence instead. These are not stories meant to impress you. They are meant to stay with you. Something tired may have followed you into this room tonight. Perhaps it has been sitting quietly beside you for a very long time. You do not need to explain it here. You do not need to fix it tonight. For the next few hours, you are allowed to rest from solving yourself. Let the shoulders unclench. Let the jaw soften. Let the breath move naturally without trying to control it. Nothing is required from you right now except listening. Some of these stories may feel strangely familiar. Some may touch places in you that words usually cannot reach. And one or two images may remain long after this video ends, returning to you unexpectedly on an ordinary afternoon months from now. That is how these teachings often work. Not by force. Not by argument. But quietly, the way rain changes stone over time. So wherever this night finds you, you are welcome here. The first story begins with a man who could not sleep. His name was Malunkyaputta. More than 25 centuries ago, in a forest near the city of Savatthi, he lay awake on a thin woven mat inside a small wooden hut while the night stretched endlessly around him. He had already spent years as a monk. He had left behind his former life. He had shaved his head, worn the saffron robe, eaten modest meals, meditated through dawn after dawn, listened carefully to the teachings. And still, on this particular night, his mind would not release him. Questions moved through him like restless birds. Is the universe eternal? Does it end? What exactly is the self? What happens after death? Does an awakened person continue somewhere afterward? Or disappear entirely? The questions circled him without mercy. Anyone who has stared at a dark ceiling at 3 in the morning already knows this place. The mind trying to think its way into peace. The mind believing that if it can just solve one more mystery, rest will finally arrive. Malunkyaputta had been carrying these thoughts for months. He noticed himself growing distant from the simple beauty around him. He no longer saw the flowers along the path. He no longer heard birdsong without turning it into another philosophical problem. Even the other monks seemed lighter than him somehow, as though everyone else had discovered a peace he could not touch. Before dawn arrived, he made a decision. He would go directly to the Buddha. And if the Buddha could not answer these questions clearly, he would leave the monastic life altogether. At sunrise, the forest was silver with dew. Mist drifted low between the trees. But Malunkyaputta barely noticed any of it because he was rehearsing his speech inside his head. The Buddha sat beneath a tree exactly as he always did, calm and motionless in the morning light. Malunkyaputta approached, bowed automatically out of habit, sat to one side, and spoke with a sharpness that surprised even him. He listed every question carefully. One after another. Then finally he said, "If you know the answers, tell me plainly. And if you do not know, say so honestly. Otherwise, I will leave this path behind." The forest became very still. The Buddha listened without interruption. Then after a long silence, he asked softly, "Malunkyaputta, did I ever promise you that I would explain whether the world is eternal? Did I ever say I would answer these questions for you?" The monk lowered his eyes. No. The Buddha had never promised such things. Then the Buddha said, "Imagine a man struck by a poisoned arrow. The wound is serious. His friends rush to bring a healer. But before the arrow can be removed, the wounded man says, wait. First I must know who shot me. What family was he born into? What kind of bow did he use? What wood was the arrow made from? What feathers were tied to it? The Buddha paused. If the man insists on having every answer before treatment begins, what happens to him? Malunkyaputta understood immediately. The man dies. He dies while questioning. The arrow remains exactly where it is. Then the Buddha said quietly. In the same way, there are questions that do not end suffering. What I teach is this: there is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There is an end to suffering. And there is a path leading to that end. These are the teachings that remove the arrow. Let those words settle inside you for a moment. How many nights has your own mind spent asking questions that could never heal the wound itself? Why did this happen? Why me? What if I had chosen differently? What if they had loved me more carefully? What if I had become someone else entirely? The mind circles these thoughts endlessly, believing the answer will finally bring peace. But often the suffering is not asking for another explanation. It is asking for tenderness. For rest. For care. For the arrow to be seen clearly at last. Tonight, you do not need to solve every mystery surrounding your pain. You are allowed to set the questions down for a while. You are allowed to simply notice the wound with compassion instead of interrogation. In the forest that morning, Malunkyaputta sat quietly for a very long time. None of his questions had been answered directly. And yet something inside him had loosened anyway. Years later, he would tell younger monks. The Buddha never answered my questions. But somehow, in refusing them, he freed me from needing them. Because the deeper lesson was never about certainty. It was about whether a human being could live peacefully inside a life that does not explain everything. Another story. Another morning. Another person arriving with a burden too heavy to carry alone. Rain had fallen during the night, and the earth still held the scent of wet soil when a Brahmin named Akasaka Bharadvaja entered the grove where the Buddha and his monks were gathered. Even before he spoke, the younger monk sensed the anger inside him. His footsteps struck the ground hard. His breathing was sharp. His entire body carried the shape of someone who had come to fight. His brother had joined the Buddha's community months earlier, leaving behind family obligations and worldly ambitions. To Akasaka, this felt unforgivable. So he arrived carrying fury. And when he stood before the Buddha, he unleashed it fully. He accused him. Insulted him. Mocked the teachings. Spoke with the kind of anger that leaves the chest burning afterward. The younger monks watched nervously, waiting for the Buddha to react. But the Buddha simply listened. No defensiveness. No retaliation. No tightening in the face. Just complete stillness. When the man had finally exhausted himself, the Buddha asked one calm question. If a guest visits your home, he said, and you prepare food for them, but the guest refuses to eat it, to whom does the food belong? The Brahmin frowned. To me, of course, he answered. If they do not accept it, it remains mine. The Buddha nodded gently. In the same way, he said, you have offered me anger today. But I do not accept it. So it remains with you. Silence filled the grove. Not triumphant silence. Not humiliating silence. Just truth.